Ladies and gentlemen, let's start again. And I would like to introduce Stefania Zappanico, who's going to talk to us about a festival, a marvelous festival actually. It's called Architectura Picta, which I believe, when did it start? Like, how many years have we been doing this?
This will be the third edition.
The third edition. And it is an amazing opportunity to actually study magnificent things and perspectives. And the setting where this takes place is also quite magnificent because it is in a refectory designed by Andrea Pozzo, and I won't reveal more than that, and I'll pass the floor to Stefania Zappanico. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all to be here. So I'm going to describe this festival, which is at the third edition. And it will happen, as you can see, during 4 days, from the 17th to the 20th of September, in Trinità dei Monti, in Rome. This festival is a very specialized and formative event, and is dedicated to the celebration, the rediscovery, and reinterpretation of the art of illusionary perspective as a tool to design the architectural space and as an integral part of the Italian artistic heritage. Architects, artists, designers, and students from all over the world, united by the passion for beauty and for art and architecture, gather to work together during 4 days of full immersion, guided by a faculty made up of the most distinguished scholars of quadraturism and maestros of decorative painting. The festival is based upon a unique, engaging format, which goes beyond the purely workshop-based or theoretical dimension, offering instead a rich and immersive experience where participants become the protagonists, just as in the Baroque space when viewers are protagonists of the optical illusion. At the heart of the experience is the venue, a very evocative place. It is the refectory of Andrea Pozzo, a magnificent hall in the very heart of Rome. This space, hidden in the ex-convent of Trinità dei Monti, is transformed into a laboratory where participants learn to see through Pozzo's eyes while being surrounded by the quadrature they are inspired by, exactly in the same place that was Pozzo's laboratory over 300 years ago. Now, before describing the festival further, I would like to say a few words to better explain the concept of Architectura Picta. Architectura Picta means illusionary perspective, architectural trompe-l'œil, quadraturism. It is a form of art that stirs emotion, produces wonder in the viewer, as the walls and the ceilings of the most extraordinary palaces and churches in Italy and elsewhere, or also around here, resplend with the beauty of Architectura Picta. This art breaks the physical limits, manipulates perceptions, plays with optical illusions. It can dissolve white walls and replace them with new spaces and new types of architectures. It can transform a flat ceiling into a towering dome, as in St. Ignatius Church, or a round ceiling can become a flat one, and it can eliminate the perception of an oblique wall and substitute it with a straight frontal one, like Pozzo did in the corridor of St. Ignatius in the Church of Gesù in Rome again. So Architectura Picta is not mere decoration. It is an important science-based art which constitutes the basis of the science of building and is a powerful tool to design the space. In fact, in order to conceive a project of illusionary perspective, it is necessary to know the rules of geometry and the techniques of decorative paintings, which means that one has to be both a painter and an architect, as Pozzo was, and as all the geniuses of Renaissance and Baroque era were. Pozzo, the Baroque master of illusionary perspective, said, if he's a good painter and if he's a good draftsman, then he must be a good architect. And this was said in his very famous treatise, Perspectiva Pictorium et Architectorum. So finally, I just want to say that illusionary perspective is a subject of study in Italian University of Architectures, who have also produced, in the last 20 years or so, a very valuable body of academic research. So let's go back now to describe what happens to the festival. So the refectory of Andrea Pozzo is transformed into a real laboratory. We start with an initial sketch, which is drawn on the basis of the measurements that result from the 3D survey conducted by the University of Florence. This sketch is divided into parts, and each part is transferred on a large individual canvas, which is assigned to each participant. So each participant then is responsible for drawing and painting the canvas, contributing this way to the construction of the overall perspectival system. The combined work will form the final artistic installation. Here, it's important to highlight that the procedure of actually using the measurements coming from the 3D survey makes the final work a project, a proper project of Architectura Picta. This would not be the same if the initial sketch came, for example, from simple photos, because that would alter all the perspective, the right measurement, and the correct point of view. The program is structured as a combined theoretical and practical pathway, and integrates academic training with hands-on artistic experimentation. It is divided into 2 daily slots of around 4 hours each, for a total of over 30 hours of tuition. Each laboratory slot focuses on a specific topic, which is explored through theoretical lectures, experimental exercises, and hands-on workshops. The syllabus is designed to transform the way to conceive the space, to develop the ability to design and represent the architectural space. It is mostly aimed at training the skill to think the space. Now, what do participants learn? They learn practical skills in creating an illusionary architectural space, acquiring the knowledge and abilities needed to reinterpret the art of perspective. All the participants receive individual attention, and everybody, thanks to the traditional techniques teaching method employed, is able to obtain very good results even without prior experience. Participants also learn in-depth understanding of the principles of illusionary perspectives, also through the study of historical treatises and the use of modern integrated digital surveying techniques. Amongst the topics included in the syllabus, there are some exercises in perspective drawing, which are taken from master manuals, like last year we did an exercise based on the Paradossi per praticare la prospettiva senza saperla by Giulio Troili. Then there will be an analysis of 3D digital and photogrammetry survey conducted again by the University of Florence. The syllabus includes illusionary perspective, points of view, shadows of classical orders, scale of colors. classical architecture elements, anamorphosis, optical illusion, aberrations, and of course the traditional techniques of decorative paintings, caught in the two main schools of decoration of Rome, which is one is based on velatura, glazing, and the other one is based on full color, a corpo. The festival experience is further enriched by cultural and sensory moments, such as live classical music, and even more importantly, study visit to the major masterpieces of Quadratura in Rome, allowing participants to engage directly with the great example of tradition that we do have in Rome. So the third edition of the festival has launched an Architectura Picta project competition, which will give the winners the possibility actually to realize a real work of Architectura Picta. So once registered, the festival participant can apply to the competition, which actually, it is a proper structured program, which we have named Following the Legacy of Andrea Pozzo from Rome to Montepulciano. At the end of the festival, 6 winners will be announced. Selection criteria include, of course, the successful completion of the workshops, exceptional artistic skills, exceptional comprehension and knowledge of illusionary perspective design. The 6 winners will form the team that will implement a new unique project of illusionary perspective inspired by Andrea Pozzo. And this will happen during the whole week and the first half of October in Montepulciano, which is a beautiful Renaissance town in the heart of Tuscany, which preserves important masterpieces by Pozzo. The team will work under the guidance of scholars and decorative paintings. In addition to the unprecedented learning and creative experience, the winner will be offered, obviously, free lodging and meals and transportation. The programs also includes, apart from the experience of actually making the work, will include study visit to the works of Pozzo in the Chiesa del Gesù in Montepulciano and Palazzo Contucci, where Pozzo painted some important frescoes, which represents one of the rare examples of secular art, because Pozzo is primarily known for his sacred works. So to conclude, the main objective of the festival and the main objective of the competition is to ignite passion and enduring interest for the art of illusionary perspective in the young generation of architects and artists. One important objective also is to build a network of institutions, universities, promoting the study and revitalization of this artistic tradition, and also to make Architectura Picta a subject of study in international academies and university of traditional architecture. So I've finished. I thank you very much for your attention. And maybe if you want to ask me some questions, if you want to know more details, and also maybe your ideas about what this festival can mean to the training of architects. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Grazie. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Very is a question. Okay.
Oh, thank you so much, Stefania. Wonderful project. I saw it last year. It was very impressive how quickly they created this amazing work. So I was very impressed by that. Highly recommend, if you can, to see at least the exhibition. My question is, maybe it got lost when talking, but do you also intend to turn it into some sort of permanent school? Because I've heard there's also a project by José Cornelio da Silva in Florence to establish a school of the visual arts of painting. And maybe you could connect there or connect to an established institution of some sort to make it a permanent program.
Oh yes, of course, we want to. In fact, the first step would be to make this subject of Architectura Picta known and actually studied maybe in some academies and University of Traditional Architecture, obviously. But we would like, and in fact, we have this plan of possibly making like a school, not a whole year school, but like 3 or 4 months, actually in the refectory of Trinità dei Monti, to make something. We were talking about this with the director of Trinità dei Monti, in fact, if possible. So this is a plan, but we have to see how things go, of course. Thank you for the question. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you. Stefania, do you know if it's teach in other place in Europe, Architectura Picta? No? Because in Belgium we have a fantastic school in Brussels, which, you know it, huh? Which teach faux marble, faux bois, fake wood, fake marble, but they don't teach perspective.
Well, the thing is that the thing that is important to say is that this Architectura Picta, okay, is a subject, is illusionary perspective, which is also a subject that I said it is studied in University of Architecture in Italy, okay, as perspective, as quadraturism. This is it. But it's made up also of decorative painting techniques. So it's 2 fields that should come together, but they never come together because of the specialization of that we have in this world. So also the attempt of the festival is actually to put these 2 arts together and work together, because an architect should also know Architectura Picta, and an artist or the decorative painter should also know illusionary perspective, because it's part of it. So that is why, but the academy you're talking about in Brussels, that is just decoration, exactly. That is why I thought that it wouldn't be nice to have this initiative, to have something that would put the 2 things together. Because even when I was talking about the academic research that has been done in Italian universities, is a body of very valuable high-level research, but it's just kept only for the university, for the few people who are interested in this. But if you read it, it's so interesting, and it opens up so many ways of thinking. And in fact, one of the professors, that is Migliari, of perspective from La Sapienza, he said that Architectura Picta trains the way to think to architects. So that's, thank you.
Any further question? Okay. Thank you very much, Stefania. And I've already been approached with further questions, so you'll have some more to answer further later. Okay, so now it's going to be my turn with the assistance of Bart Urban to introduce the Poikile project, which is actually a school for the visual arts and architecture. And we'll divide up our talk in 2 halves. I will introduce the beginnings of this project, talking a little bit about the concept behind it, the beginnings, and the idea to start a rebirth of the visual arts in the first place, and then to venture also in architecture. And this has a very practical function. As you know, the Accademia Vivarium Novum has been here at Villa Falconieri since 2016. This is a wonderful image that I'm very fond of. It's actually upstairs. It's been gifted to us by Andrej Gozic, who is one of the watercolor painters who is a regular presence here at Villa Falconieri every year, because some of you may know this, but next weekend, just to keep us very busy, we will have a 4-day festival of watercolor artists from all over the world who come here to do demos and shows, and we're now in our 3rd edition, and it's a really great event. We have thousands of people coming. The entire community of the Castelli Albani is actually coming to this, and it's a very well-known presence. It's organized, of course, with the Accademia dell'Acquarello di Monza, which is a very recognized institution internationally. And so we gather up artists from all over the world. And they always gift us with these incredible watercolors, which are born, in fact, from their actual observations, from their painting en plein air, and from the productions that they do here. So this is also part of our many endeavors in favor of a rebirth of the visual arts. And going back to Villa Falconieri, when Professor Miraglia and his 4 major assistants arrived here, Villa Falconieri was in a terrible state of disrepair. You have heard something about it when you have been touring the villa, when you were illustrated some aspects of its history. You know about the bombing of 8 September 1943. You know about the disaster that befell the villa. Also, after it was refurbished and reconstructed, the entire right wing of the villa is a reconstruction, but then disasters happened inside because it was given to the Ministry of Education, which actually used up these rooms for offices. And some of the traces are still visible today. You may have seen that frescoed walls here and there might have, sort of an electricity plug just, put inside it, and so on. And so Professor Miraglia started to really maintain the space, clear the garden. The garden was non-existent. It was redesigned thanks to the aid of landscape architects. Sforza Fogliani was a big part of this picture. And slowly but surely, the Accademia Vivarium Novum has made this its home. And with it, with this legacy, with this inheritance, we also need to take care about what it means to transmit not just the classical culture, not just Latin, ancient Greek, literature, philosophy, music, the humanities, but also the arts. Because the visual arts are among the most powerful tools. They're immediate, they reach a wider audience, they get straight to your heart, to your senses, to your mind, and they can actually illuminate you in a very powerful way that is, in fact, available to anyone. You don't need to be a scholar to understand what beauty is. Okay? We are surrounded here by beauty. I think you have perceived this over the past days, and the visual arts are part of this picture. So that is how Poikile got started. And Poikile has become a school of painting. We've had several editions of summer schools of painting. Here you see a class taught by Leonid Ilyukin, who is the director of this school and project, and he's teaching the students how to paint from real life, from an actual model, like you would do in an Academy of Arts. And the aim is indeed what I've just illustrated above. You know these photographs. The state of disrepair of the villa after the bombing of 1943, then the reconstruction, the Europa room, the one that is going to have Leonid's beautiful painting, looked like the image you have at the top right. So there was this horrendous coffered ceiling, an ugly floor, worst walls, and it was decided that we wanted something that looked more harmonious, more in line with what the actual villa was all about. The villa, like all Renaissance villas, is a villa where you have, it's a place, not a spatium, to go back to what Ulrich was saying the other time, but it's a very characterized space, place, I should say, topos, a place where people gather, a place where agriculture happened, a place where, you know, there was a unison with the nature outside. And I think walking around the gardens, you perceive this. You've all seen the very fertile hills that surround Villa Falconieri and that connect with Villa Mondragone. They're exactly the same fields, vineyards, olive groves, trees that you actually see in the print by Matthäus Greuter, which is just to my left, which was made in 1620. So the nature of this land and of this terrain is still there. And it is protected, it is part of our legacy, it is part of our culture, and it is part of the actual inherent identity of this place. Okay, so the Accademia Vivarium Novum has a big duty. It's not only a duty that refers to its academic activities, the didactics, the classical program, but it's also duty to pass on this legacy and to have turned this villa, which was completely abandoned, into something that has a deeper meaning and that ultimately ties back to what this villa was used for. It was used, indeed, for a connection with nature, but also for a connection with the self. This was the place where you had philosophical discussions, gatherings, musical concerts. You've heard these magnificent concerts that we organize almost on a weekly basis. Music is a great part of our program, and you shall see this also and hear it also tonight with our Tirtarion choir. So you see that the project is much wider than just, you know, specific aspects or fields of research or fields of didactics that one can engage with. And so the Europa Room became a little bit our manifesto. It has been refurbished. It contains bookcases and a very significant collection of books, which was gathered by a rather famous historian of comparative studies of philosophy and religions, Elemir Zolla, quite an important name, and this library collection was gifted to us by his late wife, Chiara Grazia Marchianò, and Grazia Marchianò bequeathed this to us, and we have made this room specially for it. And it also will have on the ceiling the manifesto. This is, you've seen this bozzetto. This was the very first bozzetto, the very first idea, the very first model. And I'm showing this to you again because it is indeed the manifesto for all that we stand for here at the Academy. And it is, in a nutshell, you know, the synthesis of all that we strive for. And you obviously recognize that it represents in the very center the myth of the charioteer, which is a myth that speaks to all of us. It's not something just for the Vivarienses. It's something that speaks to humanity at large. Okay, we all struggle with these two impulses. We all are the charioteer who struggles between keeping in check the white horse, standing for the logistikon, that wants to go up to the perfect world of ideas, perfect harmony, represented by the star Hestia, which is just up there. And then our baser instincts, our base impulses, what pulls us down. And sometimes the struggle succeeds. Some other times it doesn't, and we fall. And in the final bozzetto, there is also a series of chariots of the Olympian gods that only have one horse, naturally just the white one, the pure white one that goes up. The centerpiece is complemented by two other images at the top and bottom. The one at the top represents Hercules. You probably will think of Hercules at the crossroads, which is a sort of a late antique, a medieval image, okay? Hercules at the crossroads between virtue and vice. For us, it is Hercules who is tamed in his veritas, in his beastly force, brutal force, by the presence of poetry and philosophy. The two guiding lights, the ones that we study here to find inspiration and guidance in our daily lives. And all around this, we have couples of the most significant authors and wise men whose texts we study, and I underline this, we read the primary texts, not the translations. The translations are always distorted, and I underline this too, because now you can find translations online. You just need to compare different editions, and they all distort the original text. So we train our students to be able to read the primary source. And this, 5 years from now, will become absolutely crucial in every aspect, not just for classical languages, but for any kind of text. And so we have couples of authors who are guided by a particular virtue. Cicero and Plato, justice. Erasmus and Solon, the lawgivers. Prudence. Faith, hope. And then we have the most important of these virtues, the caritas generis humani, which is what Cicero talked about. And we represent this by the presence of 4 significant sage men that come from all over the world. Because you may have realized that the Academia Vivarium Novum is a space or a place, underlining both terms, where we have all the cultures together. We do not follow a specific religion. We're not a religious institution. We accept any religion. We're interested in all philosophies. We have study weeks that look at texts from all cultures, all philosophies, and all religions. And so it is important to have Menchu. It is important to have Ashoka, the great Indian king who brought Buddhism to India, but also fostered an ethical code and tolerance, incredibly. We have Pico della Mirandola, the author of this fundamental text that has been quoted so many times in the course of this conference, the oration about the dignity of man, which is the foundational texts of the Renaissance. And then, of course, the mystic, Rumi, okay, who has to be there for, well, all his incredible writings and his mystic interpretation of the Quran. Guiding lights, and guiding lights that are combined also with looking at the past, the great masters of the past, because in addition to these authors that I've just mentioned, in the smaller niches, there will also be busts of our great heroes, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, Cicero, and so on. And these are studies for them. And again, you may realize that while we may use computer renderings in a secondary or tertiary phase, the beginning is the reality in front of us, the study from the models, as one would do in the academies. And here we go, the study of movement, with a model actually doing the movement of falling backwards. Think of Caravaggio, for instance, painting this magnificent angel that is suspended in San Luigi de Francesi. What did he do? He just grabbed a kid passing by, put him up with linens on a sort of a wooden beam, and he had it dangle up and down to understand the movement. we do the same. Okay, so it's the going back to the reality of practice. And this is the final product on the canvas that Leonid is painting. And here are different phases of the study. The preparatory studies on large-scale paper pieces, and then finally the transferal onto canvas, which is going to be eventually colored. And here too. The study of the strength, the movement, the dynamism, the perspective, the di sotto in su, this effect of foreshortening from below upwards. Quite a feat. And the final version. And this is the current bozzetto, which Leonid changed due to inspiration that he took from Venice. He went to Venice on an extended trip and studied Tiepolo. And when he came back, everything had to be changed and became suddenly very Tiepolesque. And initially we were a bit worried about this change because we thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be like longer than the Sistine Chapel. But eventually Leonid was right, because it's going to be even more effective in every respect, content-wise and form-wise. And so what is above is also below. Now this is a principle that characterizes all these villas. I've talked about this connection with nature. If you just look up on the ceiling, you have an image of Venus acting as the force of concord that pacifies the four different elements. Goddess of love, goddess of harmony, as she receives the gifts of Neptune, the symbol of the waters, as she receives the gifts of Helios, representative of the sun and fire, as she receives the gifts of Ceres, goddess of the earth, and then of the air, which is here represented by this beautiful rainbow of Iris. So the four elements, just like the four seasons in the beautiful frescoed rooms that you've visited, and a recurring theme that is not just part of this villa, but of most Renaissance villas of the neighborhood. The Tusculan villas have always this interconnection of themes that tie the building with the surrounding. And then here we've made a choice to have a floor completely redone with the most earthly material possible, terracotta. All these floors in this villa were always terracotta, not marble, because they were not town palaces. And terracotta is warm. It creates a space that is comfortable, that makes you feel at home, belonging somewhere. And in it, however, we wanted to reflect the four elements in the shape of the Platonic solids. Each of the elements that you see in the corners is one element, so earth, fire, water, air, and in the center is the dodecaedron, which summarizes them all. This is the form that was given to it by Kepler, taking up the concept of the Platonic solids. So obviously this comes from a text that is very dear to us, the Timaeus. It's in the Timaeus that we read about the elements as an expression of perfect forms of ideas that are given physical presence. A text that is fundamental for us because it also speaks about harmony. It speaks about perfect measures, perfect order, and indeed, in the center of the floor, surrounding the dodecaedron, you have the quote from the Book of Wisdom. So these concepts inform our thoughts, even in terms of art, even in terms of the visual arts and our approach to learning. You all know this. the concepts of justice, truth, goodness, and ultimately beauty. The ambassador Alatia was speaking about the fact that beauty stems out of the sum of truth and good. And this ultimately goes back to what Plato was saying. You know, Plato, we heard from Miraglia's opening in that very famous passage from the Republic, where he says that the arts serve to educate people to beauty, because beauty is always correlated to some kind of truth and virtue. And this ultimately, in the bigger concept of things, is an expression of the doing of the demiurge. This is, of course, a medieval image, and one that was very popular. The demiurge, aka God, as the architect of the world, who tries to deliver a perfect world, but cannot intervene on matter, because matter resists, and so we need somehow to shape it. And this brings me to Michelangelo, of course. Michelangelo was steeped in these thoughts. You may recall that Michelangelo's upbringing and training as an artist happened in a very blessed moment and in a very blessed place. He was trained as an architect in the garden of sculptures of Bertoldo di Giovanni, who was sponsored by Lorenzo the Magnificent, and he had the chance to be accepted in the household of Lorenzo de' Medici and had conversations, daily conversations, with Pico della Mirandola, whose treatise he knew. He had conversations with Ficino, who had said that man has an innate drive towards beauty. And of course, Michelangelo started to reflect. And the best example of this kind of approach to art is indeed, you know, the famous slaves that Donatella was speaking about the other day. The slaves in the Accademia. In the same space of the Accademia, you also have the famous David, but the slaves are just absolutely incredible because they are the representation of what Michelangelo actually believed. And you read it in this very famous sonnet that I'm sure you know about. The best of artists can conceive nothing that a marble block does not potentially contain already. And only the hand that obeys the intellect will be able to let it out, to free it. Okay? And I think you can see this very well in this Atlas figure. It's called the Atlas because, you know, it has this block of marble on its head, and he's trying to get free of it, okay, as it were. There's a theory, the theory of the non finito Michelangelesco, which tells us that Michelangelo left these deliberately incomplete, okay, because they represent a struggle against matter. Now, there's different, you know, explanations to this. You know, sort of rationalists think, well, he suffered from bipolar conditions, and so sometimes he would work frantically, sometimes he would just leave things and not finish them when he saw that he was not getting the head right. But I'd like to believe that the non finito for Michelangelo expresses something equivalent to what he actually writes in this marvelous sonnet. And you can see how this sonnet is so much steeped in Neoplatonic ideas that he would have heard from Pico, from Ficino. Michelangelo was a master of perfection. Why is the David important? I mean, it's obviously important because of its incredible beauty. It's also important for what it stood for at the time. The David was the first large-scale, fully classical, fully nude, huge statue to be produced after many centuries when statues were actually tied to church portals. And so it is a revolutionary image. It is important for its time because it also stood for the freedom of Florence, which in a blessed 10 years of time under the governance of Soderini had become free of the Medici. And so David is looking in the direction of the enemy who had repaired to Rome. But more than that, it is the expression of the human ability to raise above its limits, not to become a homo deus, a concept to which I shall return, but someone who raises to the challenge, as David did in the biblical story in his fight against Goliath. Aristotle mentioned that the best of artists is the one who's not only able to express movement of the body, but also the motions of the mind. And this is packed with inherent movement and with the motions of the mind that create this tension that is absolutely palpable and tangible to us. And a few years later, the struggle, the eternal struggle, again, this is another of the prigioni, the awakening slave, and this is actually often used to represent Michelangelo's technique. Vasari mentioned that he would create his sculptures by hacking away at the marble from one face only, and the figure would slowly emerge, as would happen if you place a wax model inside a tub of water, and then slowly parts of it emerge from the depth of the water. And you can see how, in fact, the concept of the slave is very similar to this description by Vasari. Now, Michelangelo is inconceivable without considering the time when these things were produced. This is the paramount famous image, the creation of Adam. The creation of Adam, when it was made, could not have been possible. If you think that by the date when this was made, there had been 7 different treatises that had been published, and that all had as a title, About the Dignity of Man. Pico's is, of course, the most famous one. But you can see here how Adam is the image and likeness of God. So we get to the point where we have a perfect unity of form and content. So what you say and how you say it. The coincidence of opposites, the coincidence of concepts and what you say. The famous image of the School of Athens, Plato and Aristotle. One with the likeness of Leonardo da Vinci pointing upwards to the world of ideas. And note that he is barefoot. And he has under his arm the Timaeus, which was a recently discovered text that was being translated and that Ficino had engaged with. Aristotle, by comparison, has shoes on, sandals, and he has the ethics in hand and gestures towards the ground. Okay, so metaphysics and what happens in the earthly realm. And this incredible balance. Here you have a perfect balance of the figures and what they express and what they stand for. Something that was much admired, of course, in the 16th century when the first academies were born. Okay, the Accademia del Disegno, Florence, even before that, the Academy of St. Luke for painting in Rome, and then shortly after that, the Accademia degli Incamminati, the ones who embark on the road to proper, realistic painting, truthful painting rather than anything else. The authors of the magnificent gallery in Palazzo Farnese, which was a revolutionary work in a moment when art had become very repetitive and very counter-reformatory. So this is indeed what our school is about. Okay, so I've done this a bit of excursus to just illustrate the fact that we aim at going back to this idea of truthfulness, to this idea of bringing together, once again, the form and the content, just like artists in the past would have done, just like the artists who were coming to Rome to study the old masters and to study the famous sculpture collections, like Rubens did, for instance, and like our students still do when they come to Frascati for the summer schools. Academies, to be sure, can become a training ground that becomes all about the form, but I think this is preferable to other situations, because if you study form and you study precisely how to make something, The hand is connected to the brain, and your mind is connected to the hand. There's a mutual discourse. If you take a piece of paper and a pencil, and you draw, you all know this, you're all architects, you create, you think, you elaborate, you synthesize, you analyze, and you put things in the proper order. Imagine now if we get rid of all this, only feed data in a machine, and there it comes, the perfect image. Where are you? You're dead. Okay, so that is something that is obviously very well known to all of you. So the doing, the part of the material part, is very, very important. On our first day of conference, again, Alatia was saying something quite beautiful, which actually resonates with what Anna Maria was saying this morning. So the prefabs of God, what are the real materials? The things that you can hold in your hand, stones, brick, wood that you find in nature, not liquid materials, not cement that you pour, not 3D printers that create something for you, not algorithms or data that you feed to create these artificial images that populate our social media today. We are now in a complete paradox. Just like we are able to create images by pressing a button, there are artists who engage in an absolutely realistic rendering. The means are there. We have fantastic painting materials that did not exist in the 18th century, the 17th century, the 16th century, before the Industrial Revolution. These artists create hyper-realistic images, which are absolutely wondrous. Okay, and that's the thing. They speak to our society today because we are so fascinated by what is wondrous. We are like little kids who always need to be entertained in a society that is about hedonism and individualism. You create because you matter, not because you've learned from the age of 13 how to sculpt a block of marble or how to make a drawing properly. Okay? The wondrous. This is a very famous artist, Roberto Ferri. I'm sure you probably know him. He is the new Caravaggio. He reinvents Caravaggio. So my question now is, what art is there? This to me is stale imitation. It's the form without the content. It's the ability that we wonder at, but not the soul, not the mind, not the intellect, not the divinity of a creation. And then we range to other things. This is a work I'm sure you know, Black Sun. You probably remember that this is made of millions of dead flies that have been attached, glued onto a disc. And this is another case. I'm sure you know this one too. The famous skull. And it's blasphemously called For the Love of God. Okay, so with diamonds that could feed an entire continent, I guess. The value of money for Hearst becomes an artistic commodity to be marketed. It becomes something that, it became an NFT. Well, by now the NFTs are thankfully dead, at least in the case of art. And you could choose what you could buy. This happened, this series of the currency came out practically at the same time as the diamond skull. And you could choose whether you wanted the actual physical object, that is a colored dot on paper, or the non-fungible token. And you had to choose which one you wanted to keep. One could have greater value versus the other. And then the famous case, this is the outrage, okay, which I find extraordinary. The story behind it is extraordinary, not just the banana duct tape to the wall. There were actually 3 editions. And this became a show within a show, because another artist, when this was exhibited, just ate it up in a performance that he called The Hungry Artist. And then eventually, this was sold. Number 2 edition was sold, because you obviously had to change the banana when it became rotten. And then it was sold for a whopping $6.2 million by Justin Sun, who then commented, and now I get the pleasure to eat it too, which I find an insult. So when I come back to Villa Falconieri and I see the students here and I see the landscape and I see the painters painting real stuff, I don't know, I feel refreshed. I feel harmonious. I feel as if I belong and I come back home to something that is part of me. So you can look at reality, but you can also be inspired by old masters. And ultimately, I think all of us, we seek something that is about something that we cannot grasp, something that is poetic. In fact, the landscape at the left doesn't have a title. It doesn't need to have a title. The one on the right is about moral steadfastness. It's about a choice, the biggest choice one could make. What do I choose? The wrong law of the state that prevents me from burying my brother and giving him proper honor, or do I choose the divine law? And Antigone makes this choice. This is a very modern choice that we have to do today as well, in many cases that I'm not going to elaborate on, but you can obviously do this for yourself. Poetry, the Palinurus gently falling asleep as Hypnos, Somnus, gently caresses him, and he is gliding into the water in this gentle movement. This is Alicia Trifonova, one of our artists, who has this incredible ability to capture light in the most amazing way. Or strength, the reminder that there were choices made in the past. There were stories about history, choices of courage. This is another of our artists, and here this is a painting that you all know because it's just above the coffee machines, and it has all the portraits of the founders of Vivarium Novum, including Professor Miraglia and Ignatius, Gerardus, Eusebius, and Julianus. And it's about, sort of the exhortation to just seize the day, even if you know that there's a bad omen and you're going to lose the battle. So just take the moment, let's enjoy, and let's find the courage to then enter the battle the next day. The Battle of Philippi is the one that actually led to the demise of Brutus and Cassius by Octavian Augustus. So choices. This is the Hercules that is in the gardens. It's made of marble resin. Okay, sometimes you have to make a choice that you can't use the real material because it is just so horrendously expensive that it was not possible to have it, but it's very close to what it is. The Hercules recurring again, the choice. It's not Hercules at the crossroads. It actually physically is because it's at the crossroads of two pathways. But it's more of our idea of Hercules between poetry and philosophy here, inspired by the great masters, the torso. And Gleb's Giges, which I assume you've seen, downstairs in the philosophy section of the library, deliberately so, because the story of Giges, which is narrated in the second book of the Republic, is about a choice, an ethical, moral choice that we have to make. The story you all know about. You know it through the version of The Lord of the Rings, which is actually taken from this by Tolkien. And Tolkien, incidentally, is also mentioned in the papal encyclica, which has just come out 2 weeks ago, and I returned to this. What's the story about? Well, Giges is the shepherd of King Candaules of Lydia, and after a storm, he falls into this sort of grotto, and he finds a massive bronze horse and the body of a dead soldier who wears a ring. He takes the ring, and he sees that as he turns the ring, he can become invisible. As he turns it back, he becomes visible again. And so he starts to think of himself and this is reflected in the bronze surface of the horse, he starts to think of himself as the king of Lydia. And sure enough, he will do just that. He will become invisible to kill the king and become, in fact, the new king. He will also marry the king's former wife. So the power of the ring that sucks you inside that hole, and you can see this hole present there that echoes the shape of the ring. And what is this story about? Plato uses it as to pass the morale that when we are unseen, even the most virtuous of man will do horrible things. So this poses us in front of a choice and a dilemma that we can only solve if we indeed engage in philosophical thought, in training our souls and our mind. You see the reflection over there. And Gleb's choice was to use, obviously, the golden ratio. Golden ratio that is present in this circular movement of the horse. The golden ratio, this very mysterious, irrational number that is present in everything and then we cannot grasp. This is, of course, a portrait of Luca Pacioli, who dedicated a treatise to this concept. And it is interesting that in his treatise about the golden ratio, he divides it up actually in 3 different treatises. One is about the golden ratio, another is about Vitruvius, and another is about Piero della Francesca's, famous painter, treatise on the 5 Platonic solids. And this brings me to the other great rule, the golden ratio that is present even in the Vitruvian man, even in this incredibly famous image of a man who is contained within a circle, the perfect shape, within a square, and which represents Vitruvius's concept of each part being commensurate to the other, and each part being commensurate to the whole, which is ultimately the principle of the entirety of Greek art and Roman architecture. So again, omnia in mensura et numero et pondere disposuisti, the sentence from the Book of Wisdom that we have on our floor in the Sala Europa, and that is in fact what informed architecture for centuries. The commensurability of each part to the whole, and of each to its own. Vitruvius made tangible, made reality. And here, we've quoted this so many times, Francesco di Giorgio Martini, the representation of the fortified city in the shape of a man, where we find indeed, Miriam was talking about this, the market, where the belly is, the church, where the heart, where the spirituality is, and the fortress for the head, okay, the fortress of the mind, and this represents the steadfastness of the mind. And then, of course, this perfect place, which is in the courtyard of Urbino, or the ideal city of Pienza, the famous 3 panels in Baltimore, Urbino, and Berlin of the ideal city. And then we come to this. Okay? So Ettore will be able to correct me with the data here, because I'm not sure if the cost is actually this. Please tell me it was less, but indeed. So why do we have this? Why do we have a convention center, not far away from here, that operates maybe twice a year? What do they do there? The book fair, they do. They do some conventions. For the rest, it's a place that has become dusty, unhealthy. It can't be cleaned. It's ugly. It's bang in the middle of a district that already has its own issues, Eur. So where are the principles that make us feel at home, that make us feel welcome, that makes us feel belonging to something? Where's the terracotta that I feel underneath my feet? Whereas the Venustas, the Utilitas, the Firmitas, the Vitruvian concepts, the commensurability. And that's, of course, I mean, as architects, I could, like, you know, there's so many examples. Here we had Samantha talk about the Tower of Babel. She showed the version, the smaller version by Peter Bruegel. This is the other one, which is in fact in the Kunsthistorisches in Vienna. And it's indeed the building process. So, you know, the issue today is that we all feel, in this quest for individualism, we all feel we're a bit like God. You know, we matter. No matter what we do matter. So we probably need anonymous spaces, okay, spazi, okay, so that are completely empty of anything, so that we can express ourselves. And then we get an agoraphobia because we feel alone and depersonalized. And then we get to new towers of Babels, like the Shard, famous thing. And again, I don't want to know, do you have the data of how much this must have cost? But it's just, you know, an example of this concept. And I want to end with just reminding us that we cannot be, each one of us cannot be a homo deus, to quote Harari's famous book. Intriguingly, the encyclical that was published 15 days ago mentions, as a capital example, the construction of the Tower of Babel. Okay? An impressive feat, single language, technology, a single direction, everybody in unison, human beings trying to surpass their limits. But it was a project conceived without reference to God. That is, without a reference to our own limits, our human scale, supported by a uniformity that eliminated diversity and that chose homogenization over communion. When a city is built on pride and the claim to self-sufficiency, communication breaks down, languages are confused, and people no longer understand each other. Even if we can now take planes, we live in a global world, and connection is easy even on the internet. The result is not unity, but complete dispersion and the loss of self. So Babel reveals the limits of any effort that, however grandiose, arises from self-affirmation and that sacrifices human dignity for efficiency and aspires to reach heaven without God's blessing, and I would add, without our concept of limits. So I want to end on this note and say that what we hope to do in this academy is to revolutionize, go back to where we started, be conscious of our limit, be conscious of the fact that you need to read Seneca to understand where you're heading, that you need to take a pencil and a paper to understand how you can process and reason, that you need to touch stone or a tree bark to be grounded, and also that you need a comfortable, even if small, space that makes you feel human. Thank you very much. Making me nervous. So I would like, so I'm not an architect, as you have gathered, but I now would like to pass word to someone who's much more expert than I am with architecture. And so Bart, who has also been a collaborator in the summer school that you've heard so much about, will take you to the next steps and to our future developments as well.
Wow, thank you, Alexandra. So much wisdom, so many beautiful insights into the work of the Academy. And I don't know how you felt when you first arrived here, but I remember that moment very, very well. It was last year in May, and I came through this gate, and I felt like in a movie, like approaching this magnificent facade of Borromini, the trees, the gates, the gardens, and then walking over to this terrace and seeing Rome in the distance. I was just completely blown away. And honestly, it has been my dream since childhood to be part of such a project, to be able to help create an academy, to create an academy that I was held back from maybe, because whenever I researched architecture studies at universities, you would only see very ugly student models, and I was confused. I thought, we have so much beautiful architecture around, and where do I get to design something like that? I had no idea. So it was only thanks to the works of Léon Krier that kind of brings us all together here, I guess, that I gained a perspective that there are alternatives. And it was also by traveling to beautiful places in Italy, but also to Prague, which deeply impressed me, to think of a different future maybe. Maybe we could create something that beautiful. Just a quick question. I know it's been a lot of talks, and for this one I will keep it a bit more light for you, so we can have a smooth transition into the end of the conference soon, I hope. Yeah. How many times did you try to enter a building, a door, that clearly said push and you pulled? Please raise your hand. Do you remember doing that? Probably hundreds of times, right? But does that happen a lot? Well, let me put it that way. Does it usually happen in modernist buildings? Do you have that feeling? Maybe raise your hand if you feel that is the way. Yeah? Also historical ones sometimes? It's usually modernist buildings, right? Because as you can see with these doors, you would clearly identify a profile, how the door opens. And that's not the case with these flush, minimalist, modernist doors, where you're just left without any orientation. And sometimes you don't even find the door. Please raise your hand again now if you struggled to find a door to a building before. Yeah, that happens all the time. Okay. So thank you, Alexandra, for promoting me as an expert on architecture, but I don't think I would ever match the level of some of the architects, because I intentionally didn't decide to become an architect, but rather go into communications, into marketing, because I felt what this movement really needs is maybe not millions of architects, but rather someone who tries to help them communicate their work. So that's what I made my mission. And the way the Academy promotes the project for the World Campus of the Humanities is through this wonderful brochure, for example, that shows you how all these wonderful villas in the region here could become a sort of campus, an integrated university or academic campus. And on the top here, you recognize Villa Mondragone, that we've been there yesterday, and it's largely unused. It's a huge building, but it sits there mostly unused. So there's so much potential to integrate many of these buildings into such a project. And as you've seen now with the wonderful presentation of Alexandra, the Center for the Renaissance of the Visual Arts, the Poikile Center, is an integral part of this idea. And I like to also call this movement as a whole. It's in philosophy, it's in literature, it's in architecture and painting and music now. we have this deep yearning now for real art, for things that feel natural, things that feel like they are rooted in place and rooted in tradition and history. And it could be called the New Renaissance, I think. And maybe we look back in some years or decades even, and yeah, we might look back on this moment in time and call it the New Renaissance or a revived Renaissance or whatever. Because in many ways, we look back at the classics, also here at this academy, and make it relevant for our time. So this is one way to make classical art and thoughts relevant for our time, by just engaging with it, by engaging the hand. And I think in many cases today and the days before, we heard how intellectual engagement can be very fruitful and very interesting. And I also think that using the hands, the body, the embodiment, the spirit, is a very crucial part of really understanding and really engaging with all this wisdom. And so what you see here is the workshop we had with Leonid Ilyukin to create some kind of fresco-like paintings in this technique. And then also we had these beautiful studios at Villa Lucidi where we could create a new Renaissance garden, as you've heard. So this place, let's get back to it once again, because I think it's incredible to think about this place in that way as a campus. Because when you look at the pathways here, you can see that all these mansions, or actually, I think villa or mansion is quite an understatement for many of these buildings. It's more like palaces. They are connected with pathways, and it was a space, a connected space that built on the foundations of Roman villas. And it was looking at that tradition and the way these villas were conceived that in the Renaissance they wanted to engage in these ideas again and to wander together through these gardens, to have conversations. The garden wasn't made as a place to just look at. It was a place that was something to engage with. You wanted to walk through these gardens to really experience your thought process. And there's even research, modern research, that backs this up. When you walk while you talk, that's why I'm moving a little bit, because for me it's much more engaging than be standing behind this thing in the front. Then you will engage in a much more creative way, in the way you talk and the way you think. So I think it's very crucial to rediscover these qualities. And then, you also gather inside these places. I mean, Italy is a place with mostly wonderful climate, even though it can also be a bit uncomfortable in the winter, as I had to experience, honestly. And also in the summer, I'm not sure how this will be here in July. And now the journey from outside. These are like outside living rooms, the gardens. But nowadays, according to some studies, we spend like 90 to 95% of our time inside spaces, inside architecture, in rooms like this one. Well, this is more rare, I suppose, but of course, I hope to see many of you here again. So how do we design these spaces? And I think in that way, how do we design interior spaces? We come back to the Poikile project that Alexandra talked about with the visual arts, or Stefania and her beautiful project for Architectura Picta, because you can create such a different experience of an interior space when you do things like this, when you have frescoes, murals, when you include tapestry, different materials, beautiful flooring. I think you've seen that in Mondragone yesterday, that the floors sometimes were really flush and really, really shiny. it almost looked like something in a hospital, I believe. And that's a problem, you know, when you create something that is so unnatural and so industrial, in a historical building especially, I think you lose a lot of the charm, and we should be very careful with these things. So I'm very much looking forward also to Eddore's ideas for the Heritage Conference, because I think that will be such an incredible opportunity. So what you just saw was the general overview of the villas created by Greuter, which you can also see here and in the exhibition and the other rooms. What I tried to create here is a little overview of the adjacent villas that we have. So obviously in the upper left corner we have Villa Falconieri, and Villa Mondragone is here. Villa Parisi is the one right next door when you look down the gardens here on this side. And Tuscolana is the one, maybe some of you have seen it during the garden tour. You will see a villa that is up there on the hill. Villa Vecchio on the other side is down the hills and is currently also used as a hotel, just as Tuscolana. And the one I'd like to drive your attention to is Villa Lucidi. It's a bit further away, some kilometers, but you can reach it by foot, just walking outside the gates here, and Jason did a wonderful walk from there to today in the morning, and it's a very interesting place that was left abandoned for 12 years. And we talked about it a bit briefly in some other talks and individually, but I would like to drive your attention to this more. So this was the location of the first architecture spring school or summer school. It's not yet really summer, but that we just had for 2 weeks. And the main space we used for that was up here in the sort of attic space. And it's a really tall room that you can work in. And it's perfect for architecture studios because you have a lot of natural light coming in. So that's an ideal use of the space for now, I would say. And then it's also intended to become a multimedia and research center. During the past few months, there was a huge effort by the whole team of the academy, and it was very impressive to see that, how they took out all the rubble, how they collected all the garbage in there and made it really a place you can actually live in and have lectures. Unfortunately, next door we have this thing, which is a modernist addition that was made to it some decades ago. And it cannot be used by the Academy Vivarium Novum, even though that was proposed, as you've heard. But at least it could be changed in a way that it is a bit covered and that the city has a nicer experience with it. Nonetheless, this will likely be the entrance later when the idea is finalized. This is the backside of Villa Falconieri, the potential future secret garden or Giardino Segreto, where you can see the building has quite some problems and additions, and there's a lot to do, but it can become a really beautiful project. And from the top there you still have a very nice view towards Monte Porzio Catone from this very large rooftop terrace. And this is the attic I just mentioned, where the architecture studio happened. Wonderfully led by Ettore, by José Cornelio da Silva, and Jonathan is probably outside of this image, but he also did a wonderful job. So yeah, we used the walls to pin up the results and these tables to draw on. And this is the master plan that you've seen. You can also see all the drawings still in the exhibition in the room next door, which turned out absolutely beautiful. And you have to imagine that 14, or yeah, pretty much 14 people or 16 people even, worked together on this drawing. So it's incredibly coherent still. And yeah, how it could look like as a model. And then also these elevations were produced, of course, and yeah, how this could turn into reality, which is rendering version. And then here you have this Giardino Segreto, the secret garden I mentioned, from an aerial view. And on the other side of the area, we have the farm. So I'm just telling you and showing you this to remind you of the project and to remind you of the premise that is already there. It's a building that can be used, a building that is used already. And it's a great opportunity, I think. So this is how it could look like in rendering. And it's the beginning of a really big vision of this architecture school and this integrated school of the visual arts, which includes classical painting, classical sculpturing, and classical architecture. Surely also we will talk about urbanism, landscaping, all the things that are needed to make really great integrated living spaces and workspaces. But this whole project is similarly to what Nadia Everon talked about in Westhofen near Strasbourg, is only possible with a lot of support. You might think that the Academy Vivarium Novum is, well, look at the villa and what is possible here, that everyone here is bathing in resources. But I tell you, this is not the case. It's a lot of work, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of things that are happening here are just running on people being very committed to this cause. And these kind of projects all around the world, they need all the support they can get. And this can be in various forms. And I would like to, Eusebius maybe can help with or someone else with the whiteboard, because now I would like to do something a bit more interactive, because you've been listening a lot, you've been raising your hands sometimes. Well, I think we also need to get a bit into action mode now, and to really come together with all these wonderful minds that we have in this room. And I think we shouldn't leave without collecting at least some ideas, notes, keywords that we can latch onto for the future. And it might be a future conference, it might be workshops, it might be in personal conversations that we have. Can you put it here in front? Thank you. Beautiful. So Michael used to say it's a civilizational project. I think this goes way beyond architecture, arts, sculptures, philosophy, literature, languages. It even goes beyond the humanities. It goes to the civilizational level. And that means that we have to think about what it means to be human now and in the future. What kind of future are we looking towards to? And now I would like to invite you to just quickly have this thought. Imagine 10 years from now. And you see Villa Lucidi, and you come here again to visit, to reunite with this wonderful group of people, because you want to see the progress of the Academy, of this World Campus. What do you think in 10 years from now this vision happened? We have this School of Classical Arts and Architecture, and the World Campus is fulfilled as a vision. Just throw words, keywords, ideas, short lines. What do you think made that possible in 10 years? Ulrich.
One point would be how humanism is in the next future, based on the traditional concepts of being humanistic and related on the idea of humanitas, how such a humanitas can look like in a positive sense in the next future, and how this can be supported by your entire approach.
Can I summarize it as positive humanism?
Positive humanism in the future. Important is the future.
Who else has an idea? I can see lips moving.
I think you need a worldwide audiovisual footprint.
What already exists is already phenomenal, but I think for the future it is needed that the people involved reaches a critical mass so that the effects are spilling into the larger fields that we are engaging in with painting and sculpture and architecture and the humanities. It must take an active role and really start having echoes in the world. So echoes in the world, perhaps you could, in the general civilization, as you say. Yeah.
Sorry. No, it's not necessary. No, please, no. It's for her. Not for me. I apologize, but I have to run because I have the airplane to Mexico because tomorrow I start a summer school there. So thank you very much, you all, for being here. You know already the program for the next 2 conferences, basically. So you're all invited to come back. And thanks, obviously, the academia for making this possible, because everything is done only thanks to their incredible economical effort without being supported by anybody else. And thanks, especially special thanks to Alexandra for the unbelievable work she has done to make this possible. So, goodbye.
I think it's necessary to implement the basics of humanism from school to the other side, companies, and to bring companies to another thinking, perhaps in kind of also sponsoring your project.
Thank you. Thank you, Bart. I'll give 2 very practical answers. One is hands-on craft to understand how it is that architecture is assembled and repaired. And the second is to understand the business dynamics of actually developing. Thank you. Yes, developing real estate.
I think this school needs excellency, quality, not quantity. Real specialists.
Did you want to say something else?
Parlo in italiano. Mi sembrerebbe una buona prospettiva che ci fosse un continuo maggior di numero incontro tra i giovani studenti e i giovani dei luoghi, cioè di queste cittadine qua intorno, permettendo loro di poter assistere e quindi di richiamarli sempre più a una mentalità di questo genere, cioè di aprirsi al mondo.
So he was saying that it could be a great idea to open up the field and opening up to the world and therefore expand on the concept of the school. So I would say aprirsi al mondo, so opening to the world.
Yeah, if I imagine something that is growing and successful, then I imagine a young person leading it, no older than 40 years. So they have plenty of energy and plenty of dynamism and kind of expect a good long working life on it. So I shall be visiting in my dotage this wonderful centre and expect to be captivated by the energy of the people running it and their youth. Yeah, it needs to be led by the next generation, not mine.
All right, beautiful. Thank you so much. One more? Sure.
This school should be the connection between root and sprout. You can't have something new if you don't have roots. And the sprout has in its being the roots. So this is essential, to reconnect the roots to the sprouts and not to see what we study here and all our interests as curiosities of the past. It's not a past, it is a root.
Yeah, there's also this wonderful saying that tradition doesn't mean the worship of ashes, but to transmit the fire. Yeah, I love that.
I don't know if you can write that on the board, but I just wanted, that's something I've seen since I'm here, and I find it exceptional, is the solidarity between the students and the teacher. They help each other. It's a whole education, system somehow. They help in the kitchen, then they help each other during the class. It's amazing because they come here and they create like this family. It's really a community of that's very important. I think it's not just having class and learning things and then becoming themselves a good teacher, but also learning to live with each other, respect each other. It's a great community.
I think that's a very important point, actually, the community. Like, how do you organize community, or how do you create the space that enriches community in a proper way? Of course, architecture is a big part of that, but only having beautiful architecture is not enough. You need people like Luigi, like Eusebius, Ignacio, Julian, Alexandra, all the people running around here like crazy all day to really bring everyone together and to create the frame for all of this. Otherwise, you just have chaos. And beautiful chaos, probably, but still, it needs a bit of structure.
I hope later, when the choir concert will be, we will listen again to the song Frates, because this is exactly the embodiment of this spirit of community.
Wow, thank you so much. That's a lot already. Yeah, Diro?
I'll bring up the evil word, but I think we need an economic engine. Some way, if you think of what Soleri did in Accosanti, you know, he made these bells, and selling the bells was a way to finance his building efforts. Now, he never got to complete it, but he had an idea on how to finance the entire operation. And people who shared his dream came to the place, donated money, paid for the summer program, etc. And there was enough to continue the building effort. So I think without an economic engine of some kind, you know, we're always going to be begging for money.
So, I don't know if I can really make a purpose, but I wanted to mention the following thing. So I'm really here almost by accident, and so I'm friends with everybody, you know, who's responsible for setting this up. I really didn't know what to expect, and I really kind of found out, not in a very kind of linear way, what was going on here. And I think that's a little bit the problem. And I'm not blaming anybody, but I'm happy, you know, so it's a discovery for me. It's really a surprise. And then also I look back at how my experience, you know, how I kind of got part of this pretty expensive movement. So the first time, and you know, maybe Diru and some other people, Maria, maybe you remember, Gabriele Tagliaventi, he organized a number of huge gatherings. I think there was, actually that was like I think it was in the 90s, in the early 90s, 92 I think, and even before there were these conferences, a Vision of Europe, and I think at that time there was probably everybody. There was about 200 people or 250. There was Maxima Tayans, there was Maurice Couillot, there was Léon Krier, there was Rob Krier. Everybody was around. And I actually met Sami Yunus there. I met people there which became my friends and which became also leaders or teachers or deans and so on. I think, and I really like this kind of little, you know, little monastic and secret reunions here, you know, in which the academy, this kind of wonderful academy. But I think we need also like something which is a little bit more kind of, you know, like the CNU meetings, you know, like big gathering, maybe once a year, where you can bring in school classes, people, you know, you can, and then you can have breakout sessions, you have more things, which, and then you can finish with you know, you can finish with a declaration, you know, you can finish with a charter, you know, something like a charter, a declaration. And I think, you know, looking back also at Léon Krier, I remember what they did with Archives d'Architecture Moderne, the Declaration of Barcelona, the Declaration of Brussels, the Tribunal of Brussels, so a number of spectacular actions which kind of reach actually, and we shake up in some way the system. You know, people kind of notice this at the European community, the universities. So I would suggest that maybe we need to aim at creating like a larger event. I mean, these small events are very important because they are like really the brainstorming, but also create like a larger events, you know, at an international, with an international resonance, and where we kind of try to bring in a little bit more people and really get the press, also a major presence of the press, and have like a good public relation, you know.
Yeah, maybe also something like the Venice Biennale. Why not have that happen with the classical community, right? So, yeah, there's so many possibilities. Or I think Carl mentioned 2 days ago the idea to revive the Prix de Rome, right? To have this big architectural award in Europe. I mean, the Driehaus Prize is amazing, obviously, but we also need to, I think, start some European institutions and things, Maria?
Yes, and I think that big active events should be accompanied by an exhibition that could be from the summer programs also, because that will be an amazing incentivation for students to dream about having their work exposed to. So it's a wonderful way. Maybe it's not an award per se, but to be part of an exhibition in which their, let's say, the architects that inspire them are going to look at them is amazing. So I think that can be part of all the initiative.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Carl, I think, was next.
Yeah, and maybe something like the Prix de Rome, but also another more interesting concept would perhaps be something like the Pythian Games. The ancient Greeks, they had not only the Olympic Games for the sports, but also the Pythian Games for culture. And a place like this is a wonderful, you know, please put this on the board. It would be a dream, you know, if you could have competitions, friendly competitions and cooperations. It could only contribute to the community that Nadia spoke of, and it would be the most perfect occasion to really breathe life into the competitive and meritocratic, you know, backbone that is a classical culture.
This has inspired me to think of an anti-Venice Biennale, not thematically, but the Venice Biennale is an exhibition. The Frascati Biennale, which should happen in alternate years, becomes a participation in which you come along and you design something and you critique and you engage with your colleagues and your friends and other traditional architects, and we learn from each other and we inspire each other, and we can show a better model for a Biennale.
I think this is a very good idea, but also we have to have the courage to go right in the middle of Venice Biennale and show everything that we can do. And this is a plan that I have for several years, but we need all the efforts to do an exhibition right in the middle of Venice Biennale and show them that architecture still exists.
Okay. Hello? Yeah, okay. Concrete proposal. Develop an overall development strategy for this entire venture. Which are the major goals and how they can be achieved in terms of activities, operations, and how they can be achieved financially. We need an overall strategy, in other words, a financial strategy, how to develop the whole thing. And related to this financial strategy, coming to this worldwide content footprint, is what is our advertising approach, our regular advertising approach. The last point is how to incorporate the local community with the aim that local people here will assist you. That you not only remain a more or less elitarian island in the eyes of the local community. There are some guys in some villa over there and we do our daily business, but involve them.
Another theme I think often about, we have so much more wars in the world, and Gaza is disrupted, Romania is disrupted. What do you think perhaps about the workshop in the next years for rebuilding some points, quarters in Ukraine, sorry, not Romania, sorry, Ukraine and Gaza, Palestine, in the mind of humanism, in the hope that people which are living there in tents nowadays can a little bit become heals again after the war impressions.
The Inbau network was mentioned several times during this conference. I think it was 2 years ago in Stockholm that we had an entire conference on this, organized by Inbau and also the King's Foundation and the Axon Jonsson Foundation in Sweden. It was excellent. There are a lot of people working on such projects, and I think it would be a wonderful approach to bring together in a single project several summer schools and maybe architecture school faculties, Westhoffen, something in Guatemala, maybe Miami School, Notre Dame, everything that is in Europe, to create an entire strategy rebuilding plan for war-torn zones. And that could be something that really brings together the community and creates some momentum, because these countries really need that kind of support, I think. Otherwise, they will just make the same mistakes as ever before. So I absolutely love that. Yeah, thank you. Do we have one last one?
I would like to stress the deep meaning, which, of course, it is maybe in everyone's head. What was the vivarium? Because we are here at the Vivarium Novum. A strategy to put old knowledge into the hand of new people. And it succeeded. It is probably the best encouragement we can receive. No, the old knowledge, the knowledge of antiquity, put in the hand of the apparently Christian barbarians. Yes, it is a strategy of transmitting this old knowledge into a world of tomorrow we don't know, but which deserves our effort, our care, our attention to leave this treasure, and if possible the key to it. And when they will one day want to open it, they will have it.
Okay, the very last one by Michael, because his hand was up so long. And then we also don't have any space anymore.
Thank you. It has been proposed by Professore Settis in Pisa, since medicine, the practice of medicine, has a Hippocratic oath, that there is the establishment in the field of architecture and urbanism, the establishment of a Vitruvian oath, to take a pledge to be true to the three Vitruvian principles of durability, beauty, and utility. Yes, Professor Settis in Pisa.
Thank you. One thing that I'm not seeing on the whiteboard is the word networks and allyships. International Sociological Association has a big section called a Research Committee on Cities and Urbanism. There are other organizations within social science divisions that are dedicated to work on cities, public spaces, housing in particular, which I think are all potentially places for building connections and alignments. So I would like to wave here from the social science corner to say, we're here for you to support.
Actually, in this instance, it's your applause because you created this marvelous whiteboard, which is filled with a lot of very charged, great keywords, I think. Shortly building up on what you just said, we found with, for example, the architectural uprising and Inbau and other movements, which are like grassroots movement in this community, that surveys are really a big, powerful tool. Like when you can demonstrate that in most surveys and polls that you do, or like Create Streets in the UK did, that 70 to 90% of people clearly prefer classical architecture, that is a very powerful tool. And then you can also include, of course, the neuro aspects, the neuro architecture, psychological aspects that we talked about here. All the science aspects. The more we have, like when you are working on, and this is maybe now the practical side from this, if you feel you have a project that could contribute to this, because these measures are not exclusive to the World Campus, I think this is useful for the whole movement, for the whole civilization probably, for the values that we cherish. Whatever you are working on, try to incorporate some of these things and talk about your work is my pledge to you, because I think that makes all the difference. When you start showing the work, when you start showing what could be possible, people get inspired and people take action. And that's what we found also with the work of these grassroots movement. One comment, Lucien?
It's just something, you know, I just want to follow up on the network issue. And you know, I know that, you know, having worked in various summer schools, you know, also with Nadia, Table Ronde, there's so much going on, but it's not really yet connected. And for example, I was thinking now recently, so Frank Martinez, he mentioned that we more than 180 applications for the summer school and only 30 students accepted. I would like to know the 150 who have not been accepted, because these were 150 people who wanted to know about traditional architecture. They want to be involved, and they have to be sent away. And I wish there was a way to kind of fish back, get these people somewhere, and have them involved. You know, and that's why I think a bigger meeting would be a possibility to get these people, to know these people. You know, to give them this chance to kind of delve into, develop this kind of interest.
Yeah. Excellent remark. Also, I would mention in this case Michael Hadida's work, who is working on the new Agora, which he intends to become a platform for the movement, where you can also transmit the students you couldn't take to other schools. So it's a very easy way that takes out a lot of the organizational work. Georgia, maybe 3 more minutes and then we're probably good.
I only want to say that Inbau is working on this calendar. We will do one visually also with all the length and also on thematics, because not all summer school are equal. Some are more craft oriented, other more urban design. So this is something that is discussed now in the educational committee of Inbau. How to make like a legend, visual legend for students to be able to redistribute.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Then, yeah, probably the last question in regards to what we worked on here now is, please raise your hand if in some capacity you can imagine that you would that you could be a support in any of these fields, that you maybe have some network or some contacts that you can contribute to the community. Maybe you have some press contacts or publishers that you know. Maybe you even know some former clients that are keen on supporting the humanities at large, or supporting schools like the Westhoffen School, the Bunesti School in Romania, or this project in Frascati. Please raise your hand if you can imagine to contribute to this beyond what you're doing right now. Wonderful. There's a couple of people. More and more. Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't want to have the burden on me to close this now, so I don't know if Alexandra will say some words, or Luigi, to wrap this up, but yeah, of course, but maybe some closing words if you would like, Luigi. That would be great.
Concert this evening, and we'll conclude this conference with this gathering of all the students of our academy who will sing ancient poetry in Latin and Greek with the music of the Renaissance and medieval tradition. And this evening probably I will say also some other words to conclude this wonderful conference, which was very fruitful, I think, and which gave to all us something new to be cultivated in our souls. And so I only can thank you all, but this evening we'll say something more and something else. Yes, of course. After we can go down and restore a little bit also our body. Yes. I would like just maybe at this moment, you could have done this also in the evening, but I feel the necessity to express admiration and gratitude to Professor Miraglia for the vision he had 50 years ago. This means to believe that you are right, and that you have just to start, and then the grain will grow by the virtue of the truth it is in it, and of the force. So I think also we have to make this pledge, of course, to contribute with what we can to this place, but to assure that it spreads. In the inspiration, the content is already so well expressed in all we heard this day, that we need to work to this dissemination of this place and of this method and of the symbolical construction in it. And that's why my dream will be now to be the frontier of the Novum Vivarium Empire. The outside world to which the Novum Vivarium is invited to reach. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.